Corridor's plan was simple. One page, one building. Lady Nettia looked at it for a long time. The problem was real and she had known it was coming. The royal highway connected the palace, the encrypted passages connected the regional offices, the transit hub connected the allied kingdoms, but there was still a category of person who had no path into the private city. The individual engineer, sitting outside the walls, who needed to reach the inner sanctum to fix something broken inside it. The head engineer came to Lady Nettia the same morning Corridor did. He had spent 3 hours trying to find a way in. The encrypted passage let him reach the city's outer network, but stopped there. The inner sanctum had no entrance from outside. He could see the buildings he needed to work on through the watchtower records. He could read the logs, trace the errors, identify exactly which war machine had a fault, but he could not get to it. He was standing at the edge of the city with a set of tools and nowhere to use them. Lady Nettia understood the problem precisely. Opening a gate into the inner sanctum was not an option. Not now, not ever. Every wall she had built was designed to make the inner sanctum invisible and unreachable. A door facing the world road would undo years of careful architecture, but engineers needed to get in. The question was not whether to create a way in. The question was how to create a way in that could be completely controlled and instantly shut down if anything went wrong. Corridor's answer was the guard tower, a small, heavily fortified structure built in a corner of the market district, not in the inner sanctum, not on the world road. In between, positioned deliberately where the city's outer defenses were strongest and where every approach could be watched. The guard tower had two features and nothing else: one door facing the world road, one internal passage connecting to the inner sanctum. That was the entire design. The outer door had the strictest lock in the city, not a combination, not a code, a specific identity. The guard tower's bodyguard carried a single rule: admit only engineers whose personal key matches the lock exactly. No other key. No visitor passes, no diplomatic exceptions. The architect of chaos had spent years finding gaps in Cloudoria's defenses. The guard tower was designed to have none. If someone knocked and their key did not match, the door did not open. There was no second option. The internal passage was equally precise. Once an engineer entered the guard tower and proved their identity, they could reach any building in the inner sanctum through the internal passage. But, and this was the detail Lady Nettia insisted on, the passage did not stay open. The engineer entered, the engineer did their work, the engineer left. The door locked behind them. Each visit was its own event. Each visit required a fresh identity check at the outer door. The passage was not a bridge that stayed up. It was a door that opened and closed for each individual crossing. The head engineer was the first to use it. He arrived at the guard tower's outer door, presented his key, was admitted, walked the internal passage to the war machine workshop, performed the maintenance, and left. Total time, 40 minutes. At no point did his presence require any change to the inner sanctum's own walls or guards. The inner sanctum did not know he was coming. It did not need to. The guard tower had already verified him. He simply walked in like any trusted resident, through the back passage that only he and a handful of others were authorized to use. Gerald heard about the guard tower and had the obvious question. He found Lady Nettia near the construction site. If the guard tower is the only way into the inner sanctum from outside, does that mean if someone finds the guard tower, they find everything? Lady Nettia turned to face him. No, she said. They find one door with one lock that only opens for one key. If they do not have that key, they are standing outside a locked door in the middle of the market district. Visible, logged by the watchtowers, going nowhere. And if the key is stolen? Gerald asked. Lady Nettia had expected this. Then we destroy the guard tower, she said. That is the other half of the design. Because the guard tower is the only exposure, the only building in the market district whose inner passage leads to the inner sanctum, we can remove it entirely without touching anything else. Shut the outer door. Seal the internal passage. The inner sanctum does not lose a single wall. The city does not change. We simply stop having a guard tower until we have rebuilt the lock. Lady Nettia paused. Then she added something quietly. The architect of chaos has been seen near the city walls twice in the past month. The watchtowers have his address. He is not inside. He has been testing the perimeter again, the way he tested it before the night of 1,000 doors. He will find the guard tower eventually. She looked at Gerald. That is why the key must never leave the engineer's hands. Not once. Not for a moment. In AWS, the guard tower is called a Bastion Host. And like the tower, it is not a permanent bridge but a controlled checkpoint. Every engineer who passes through it must prove their identity at the door every single time. A Bastion host is an EC2 instance deployed in a public subnet. It is the single entry point for SSH or RDP access to private EC2 instances that have no public IP and no direct route from the internet. You connect to the Bastion from your own computer. From inside the Bastion, you connect again to the private instance using its private IP address. The lock on the outer door is the Bastion security group. It should allow inbound SSH, port 22 for Linux, port 3389 for Windows RDP, from only your specific IP address or IP range. Not 0.0000, not a broad CIDR, your address. The moment you allow the world to knock on the Bastion's door, the guard tower's purpose collapses. Every connection attempt from any IP is logged by the watchtowers, the VPC flow logs, but only your key should ever open the door. The internal passage is SSH agent forwarding, or a 2-hop SSH connection. From your machine, you SSH into the Bastion using your private key. From the Bastion, you enter into the private instance using that instance's private IP. The private instance's security group should allow SSH only from the Bastion's private IP, not from the internet, not from a broad range. The chain is your computer to Bastion, Bastion to private instance. 2 hops, 2 identity checks. Each closes when the session ends. The exam will test 2 Bastion-related scenarios. The first, an administrator needs to access a private EC2 instance in a private subnet. There is no public IP on the instance. The answer is a Bastion host in the public subnet. The second, the question asks about Session Manager, AWS Systems Manager Session Manager, as an alternative to a Bastion. Session Manager lets you connect to private instances through the AWS console or CLI without needing a Bastion, a public IP, or open SSH ports at all. It is the modern alternative. If the question emphasizes removing the need for a Bastion entirely, the answer is Session Manager. Here's the exam critical distinction. A NAT gateway allows private instances to initiate outbound connections to the internet. A Bastion host allows an administrator to initiate inbound connections to private instances from the internet. These are opposite directions. NAT is for your instances reaching out. Bastion is for you reaching in. They are often confused because both involve public subnets and both relate to private subnet access, but they solve entirely different problems and should never be swapped in an answer. The guard tower stood in the corner of the market district, small, unremarkable from the outside, watched by watchtowers on every approach. The head engineer used it 3 times in the first week. Each time, a fresh key check, a clean entry, a closed door on the way out. The inner sanctum's walls did not change. The bodyguards inside did not need to know an engineer had passed through. The guard tower handled all of it quietly, leaving only a record in the watchtower logs. Lady Nettia looked at the completed city one evening from the watchtower archive roof. Every problem the kingdom had ever faced had been answered with a specific piece of architecture. Walls, gates, road signs, checkpoints, bodyguards, a secret courier, watchtowers, private shortcuts, alliance tunnels, a transit hub, a royal highway, and now, a guard tower. Each one had been built in response to something real. Nothing had been added for its own sake. She thought about what the architect of chaos would find if he tested the perimeter now. Every door locked, every road logged, every key accounted for. She allowed herself the thought briefly that the city was finished. Then she went back inside. There was always something next.